When I first started using anything at all, it was marijuana. I was about 13.
So I was first introduced to marijuana when I was about 16 years old. I think it was my junior year of high school. At that point, everybody was doing it, so it felt safe and it felt cool and it felt fun. And I was drinking at the time too, so I just thought it was another party drug, and I actually thought it was safer than alcohol.
Maybe my junior year of high school, at a party, kind of the usual setting you would see it. And I just kind of did it socially, like once in a while. And then I started to use it to cope with my problems. And that's when it kind of changed for me.
I mean, it's addictive like most drugs, really, either psychologically or physically addictive.
These products are very different than what existed when I was a young girl. All marijuana today, whether it's the plant or whether it's concentrates, are considered high potency.
And it started with just using the medium potency, just the leaves, what everybody thinks of when they think of marijuana. Started dabbling in dabs and high potency concentrates, and that's when things really started to go downhill.
Colorado teenagers Will Brown and Jasmine Block are united by the all-too-common bond of addiction.
My life is falling apart around me.
I started using it just to feel like I could function.
The pair, now sober, both say they got hooked on a high-potency form of marijuana extract.
We used to call it weed because it would grow like a weed in the middle of the freeway. That's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about stuff that's been genetically bred to have huge amounts of the psychoactive ingredient THC that's been man-made and man-extracted in order to make something super concentrated so that your brain will react to that in a much more profound way than it would just a little bit of weed. When you smoke the dried leaves and the plant material, essentially that you can really only get 30-35% THC maximum, the traditional way of smoking.
The plant wouldn't hold anymore in the weed, so they started extracting the THC and concentrating it and making it into these other hugely potent products that can be upwards of 90%, even 99%. In crystalline and certain oils. All marijuana today, whether it's the plant or whether it's concentrates, are considered high potency.
We have a massive new industry whose business it is to addict young brains that has risen up in the last 10 years based on a lie that marijuana is harmless. They have sold this idea that, even though it's so much more potent today, that today's marijuana is generally harmless.
I remember once I got weed from Colorado, and being a heavy smoker, just a few hits in, I was extremely high right away.
Well, Colorado was the first state to legalize recreational marijuana in 2012, and Johnny was 12 years old. And when it came out into the dispensaries, he was 14 years old. Unfortunately, he went to a party when he was a freshman in high school, and there was marijuana at the party. That was just the start of Johnny's marijuana use.
A lot of kids think that you can't have a problem with marijuana. It's not addictive like drugs like cocaine or heroin, but it really can be. It really can be.
THC binds to receptors in the brain and all over the body, and that's what triggers the high. Not everybody who uses marijuana is going to become addicted, but what we've seen is that 1 in 3 people who've used in the past year meet the criteria for addiction, or what scientists are now calling cannabis use disorder.
Marijuana is really a drug that helps you just forget anything you were feeling aside from just happiness. It sort of puts your life on pause for a long time.
So I got my marijuana from a drug dealer, and he kind of introduced us to the high potency products because of course he wanted to get us more hooked, more addicted, and it worked.
So looking back at it now, I was fully dependent on marijuana. Like, I could not go a day without it.
So anybody who says marijuana is not addictive is in denial. It's not even up to debate now. It's a established fact that marijuana is an addictive substance.
Your brain and body build up a tolerance for it. So you want to use more of it, you want to use higher potency, then there comes a time when it does very little for you because your brain is so used to it, you feel like you can't even function without it. And that's called an addiction, and we're seeing very, very large rates of that today.
I knew that I'd hit rock bottom in terms of my drug use when it was at the point that I was doing anything and everything in my power just to not feel like myself, be out of my element.
I just didn't want to be around everyone. I was really irritable.
I couldn't think without it, I couldn't function without it, I couldn't sleep without it.
I tried quitting for a week and I had horrible withdrawals. And especially now with fentanyl being put in a bunch of drugs and people getting laced and dying from it, I also can't believe how careless I used to be.
I just wanted to use to take away my feelings and just numb my feelings for a while.
I wasn't paying any attention to school. I wasn't going to any of my classes. I had more absences than I did show up, and I barely graduated high school.
My room was literally 50 degrees and I woke up sweating, just wearing shorts and a t-shirt.
Going through withdrawals was really brutal, so I just couldn't wait to go back on it and feel good again and become couch locked again and, waste my life away.
I was stealing from my friends, stealing from my mother's own house.
We were spending hundreds every few weeks. Money that I could have in my account right now, but I wasted it on that.
You had no way of getting out of it, of getting out of this cycle.
It was affecting me mentally, it was affecting my health physically. I was just not okay. I just completely changed as a person.
We're not only seeing the fact that they really want this, they're thinking about it all the time, but actually they're showing physical signs of addiction. Those physical signs include increased heart rate. We're also seeing increased signs of different cancers. And again, that's not surprising because marijuana contains many carcinogens. A big physical problem we're also now seeing that's gotten in the news a lot and we're seeing a lot lately is something called cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, uncontrollable vomiting. So we're now seeing the physical manifestation of using excessively, resulting in people that can't really stop vomiting, and they don't know what it is often because it's a very new thing. It's only happened because of this high concentration THC. We never had this before.
I would wake up and have to literally throw up, and I would be throwing up bile. It was absolutely disgusting.
Anyone's brain is not fully developed until about age 25 or 30 now, they're saying. And boys' brains develop later than girls, usually by a couple of years. And what that means is that in that time of growth, your brain is forming really memory, intelligence, all of these things that really make you a human being. These young years are crucial, these young years really before age 30.
THC as a molecule actually resembles a natural chemical we have in our bodies called anandamide. So it tricks the brain into allowing the THC to bind to that receptor, and it changes what that receptor normally does. So in the prefrontal cortex, for example, which is the last part of the brain to develop, it causes thinning in the prefrontal cortex to the tune of 6 to 8 IQ points that are a permanent loss in gray matter in young people.
That's a huge amount. That's enough to make you from an average student to a below average student.
So before I got into marijuana, I wasn't the best student, but I surely wasn't where I was at my junior, senior year. I was a B, C, A student, around that, so average.
You literally mix up your days, you forget everything. I would see a friend the next day and they'd be like, oh yeah, you left this in my room. And I was like, when did I go to your room? I don't remember anything. And even in my recovery, my memory is still pretty bad. It can literally make people stupid, literally lowering your IQ, making you dumb.
My senior year, I finished with 1 D and all Fs. I think my GPA was like a 0.8. It was laughably, that's ridiculous. It's not even a 1.0.
He got a perfect SAT score in math, 800 out of 800. He had a 4.0 GPA all through school until his last semester of high school. He got 4 Ds and barely graduated from high school.
It disables you from being able to do those things that you need to do. It really, it's awful.
What we're seeing is over time, when you have such a compulsion to use it, the paranoia can set in. In fact, some studies show that with today's high-potent marijuana, you are 5 times more likely to get a psychotic break and a psychosis, schizophrenia as well.
Started off very subtle, like I would hear voices, like for example, my mom would yell my name and I'd run upstairs and realize that she was sleeping. Or I'd get up randomly while I'm smoking with my friends and be like, did you guys hear that? And they would be so confused and wonder what I'm talking about.
In Johnny's case, we don't have mental illness in our family. He did not have any genetics that predisposed him towards psychosis. He even had several gene tests that were done. He never had mental illness until years after he started using marijuana.
I was starting to see things. I was starting to obsess over inanimate objects. I was starting to think that they were symbolic and that God or the universe was trying to send me messages from these random objects. And that's when things really started to get bad.
He became very paranoid that people were watching him. He owned 5 different devices at one time and said that his phones were bugged.
Because ever since I went through that psychotic episode with cannabis, it really scarred me. That's when I just started to do some research on cannabis and do psychosis and effects on the adolescent brain. And for daily users, under the age of 25, if you smoke daily and heavily, 1 out of 20 will develop schizophrenia within their lifetime. If you're in that majority that doesn't have psychotic experiences with marijuana, there's still adverse effects on your mental health and on your developing brain. They found that not all of these effects are reversible either. So that's what's really hard for me to swallow, is knowing that I possibly could have done permanent damage to my brain.
We're also seeing credible, strong, unfortunate links to suicide. Suicidality, suicide thoughts, suicidal ideation. We're seeing today's marijuana do things that, my parents' generation who used, the baby boomers, they never dreamed that it could affect them this way.
He said he was having a hard time making friends. And I told him, that's normal. It takes a while to make friends, and you're a good friend, you'll make good friends. And he said, is it normal to feel like killing myself every day?
I was having a lot of suicidal ideation and I wanted it to go away super bad. I wasn't working, I wasn't going to school. My friends were worried about me, my family was worried about me.
I just felt like a huge disappointment. Disappointment to myself, disappointment to my family. I was just super lost, lonely. And I don't know. When I wasn't doing good academically, that really, really, really just hurt me because I kept thinking about them. And, you want to do the best for your parents. I didn't want to disappoint them even more, knowing that I was doing all of this stuff that they would never approve of. That just really took a toll on me. And that was just another reason why I just didn't want to be around anymore, and I completely checked out.
For 5 years, we struggled with his marijuana addiction. And at the age of 19 years old, sadly, Johnny died. He came here to the house for dinner and he said, "Mom, I just want you to know that you were right." And I said, "About what?" He said, "About the marijuana. You told me that marijuana would hurt my brain, and it has ruined my mind and my life, and I'm sorry, and I love you." And 3 days later, he took his life.
I know how some of you kids are feeling. You're probably like, oh, this is such an exaggeration, or oh, that only happens to a few people, but it happens to more people than you think. I was probably just like you and thought, oh, I would never have a problem like that, or, you know, I would never use drugs to cope with my issues, but it can change just like that, like it did for me. I never thought I would have a problem like this, especially with how I was in high school. I had decent grades, really involved in like sports and everything. Literally in just a year, it completely changed me as a person, and not for the better.
If somebody would have told me this stuff when I was 13 or 14, it wouldn't really resonate. It would, you know, I'd say to myself, I'm gonna be fine, or it can't be that severe. And to the most part, that's true. I'm not trying to fear monger. I'm not trying to tell people what to do, but, you know, knowing the risks and knowing that there are some difficulties that I'm experiencing, and these little subtle differences in your brain chemistry and your brain makeup will become apparent when you're older. And telling that to someone who's 13 who doesn't think long term is very difficult for them to wrap their heads around.
I have more teens who come up to me after I speak at schools saying, you know, after hearing you talk, I think I might have a problem, and I think I need to get some help and stop. We believe that Johnny was here for 19 years. Sorry. I think he was given to us so that we could warn others.
For a larger and larger, every day, larger and larger group of people, they're becoming, unfortunately, the Johnnies of the world and the Ethans of the world. You know, Johnny doesn't have a life right now to talk about what might happen to him in the future. He can't be worried about his future because he's dead. Ethan every day thinks about this and worries about his future. Is this going to affect me long term, even though I've stopped?
There's always that doubt in my mind where it's like, I could have been better. You know, if I'm accomplishing this much with a potentially damaged brain, imagine what I could have done if I never smoked. And those thoughts like that, you know, they're illogical, sure, they're not productive, they're counterintuitive, but, you know, with my anxiety and my intense regret, it's hard not to contemplate on those thoughts and invite them in. They're constantly there. You know, the fear of developing severe mental pathology is still there, you know, and that's just something I gotta live with now.
I would say to whoever's watching, if you're struggling mentally, to not go down the path that I did, thinking, you know, things like that start out fun will help you out and make you forget. It's not good to hold everything in. I really advise getting professional help and talking to someone.
Get to know yourself a lot better and talk to other people that feel what you're going through without the fear of being judged. One of the biggest things that I've learned is it's really important to surround yourself with all the right people. I ended up being just in the wrong place at the wrong time a lot of different times, and that was really had a lot to do with who I was with, who I was surrounding myself with, a lot of bad people.
You can go to a family member or a friend if you're not comfortable seeking out a professional just yet.
Any sort of hobby that you can take up, whether it's collecting something or, you know, just going for walks in the park, photography, playing sports.
Find healthy coping mechanisms to get through whatever you're going through.